So, big news from the drug science realm. President Trump has issued an executive order that tries to speed up the process of reclassifying weed from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. So, what does this mean for the everyday person? What does this mean for me, a drug researcher? And what does this mean for the industry? Today, I'm going to give you a breakdown of what this executive order does and does not do. So the main thing that this executive order does is it helps people like me, people who are drug scientists who are just trying to study what these effects are. So to understand this, you have to have a little bit of background on the drug scheduling system. So the DEA currently schedules drugs as 1 through 5. So 1 is considered to have no medicinal properties and to be strongly addictive. Whereas the lower, or I guess higher you go in numbers, the less likely that drug is to be considered to be addictive, and also the more medicinal properties it actually has. So Schedule 1 is saying that there are no medicinal properties and it's highly addictive. And that is where weed was. And that is also where things like heroin are, and also things like every hallucinogenic out there. Now, this reclassification is saying that it's going to move from a Schedule 1, so highest addictive potential, no medicinal uses, to a Schedule 3, which means it has kind of moderate addictive potential and some medicinal uses. Now, for a drug researcher, this is a big deal. So I have a Schedule 2 through 5 license. In order to get this, I had to go through a whole process. So I had to get fingerprinted. I have to turn in basically all of the research I've done in my life. So turn in my resume and prove that I'm a valid human being who's been doing this research. And after I've gone through this process, I can then request samples of these drugs from the government to be able to get kind of pure and regulated supply. Now, people are always kind of curious about the fact that researchers are just basically getting their supply from the government. But it makes sense. They can properly regulate it. And when I request a substance, I have to send in my research proposal that is peer reviewed by somebody from outside the realm if it's not based on a grant that the government has directly given me. It is a very rigorous process to make sure that we are doing our research properly. And if you want to do research on something that is a Schedule 1, you have to pass an additional hurdle. And this, in a lot of cases, requires additional information. It requires additional security measures. They really keep Schedule 1 at a different level than the rest of the schedules. For somebody like me, who's a cannabinoid researcher, this is a big obstacle. And so a lot of times what we do is we just use the synthetic cannabinoids, things like WIN, that are very similar to weed, but not identical, because those are not a Schedule 1 drug. We're not really actually studying the drug itself, and it really is preventing a lot of the research. So rescheduling this from a 1 to 3 is a big deal for people like me when it actually happens. And this reclassification could actually help with some of the stigma. For example, we are now saying that the drug is not necessarily super highly addictive and no medicinal properties. We're moving it to moderately addictive with some medicinal properties. That might change the public's perception on the drug. We're not entirely sure yet. This also changes the tax code, which is a big deal for the industry. So the tax code basically says that you cannot have payroll expenses. You cannot have deductions if you are trafficking in a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 controlled substance. So since they are reclassifying weed from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3, now that tax code problem does not apply to them. So this is a big boon for the industry in terms of just tax exemptions, but also might make it more likely that things like banks will feel comfortable working with this industry. So the reason that people have to use things like cash or ATMs inside of store instead of using their debit card or credit card at places that sell this is because banks don't really like to work with this industry because it is risky for them. So in terms of the industry of dispensaries and growers, this is a huge deal. Now, here is the important part. Here is what this executive order does not do. It does not legalize weed. This means that it is still technically illegal to buy it on a federal level. So according to different states, they allow it for recreational or medical purposes, but this is not okay according to the federal government. So the federal government has just been kind of letting states get away with things for right now, but this executive order is not changing any of that. So it is still illegal on a federal level, which means that you can't transport it across state lines. And still, you are not allowed to buy it, technically, for either recreational or medical purposes. Now, the thing is, people are like, okay, but they just reclassified this. So now they're saying that it does have medicinal purposes. Yeah, it does have medicinal purposes now, according to the government. But that does not mean that it is legally allowed to be prescribed as of the moment. It still has to be FDA approved for things. It has to go through that process still. Now, this weird legality status actually leads to one very strange loophole that exists that a lot of people talk about, and that is that you cannot own a firearm while being a user of weed. So the law specifically states that you cannot own a firearm if you are a unlawful user of a controlled substance. Now, a controlled substance in this case is weed. An unlawful user means that you're using it when it's not legal, which, as I've just mentioned, it is not federally legal. So it is still technically illegal for anyone who smokes or uses weed to own a firearm. Now, the Supreme Court has actually agreed to see this case, so this is something that we'll see results from in the next probably half a year. But as of right now, that is still illegal. And as of right now, none of this has actually changed. So Trump has issued an executive order, but we also saw that there was this push during Biden for basically the same thing. So Biden was like, yeah, we should look more into this. And then they held hearings and then it just kind of faded away. That might be where we're starting with this. So it could be that the DEA just says, okay, executive order means that now it is rescheduled and we're just going to write this down and it is now a Schedule 3. Or it could be that they're going to move to hearings again. And then we're kind of back where we were in the first place, multiple years ago. So as a drug scientist, I appreciate this news. I am happy for the chance of this to actually go through, but I am in the camp of I will believe it when I see it.